this right down there so just you and I can just talk.
Sure.
So tell me about your service. I've always known, that you were in the service, but I don't really know any specifics of it or anything like that.
I joined in July of 1982, and I went to basic training at Fort Dix, New Jersey. I was up with the Army.
Yeah.
And I was in Fort Dix, New Jersey from July to January, and then from there I got stationed in Hawaii for 4 years.
I see.
And while I was in Hawaii, I did the whole Orient scene, the Philippines, Japan, Thailand, and I was there from 83 to 87, end of 87, and from then I got transferred or PCS to Fort Riley, Kansas with the 1st Infantry Division.
Okay. So what'd you do when you were
Well,
in the West?
I was primarily a mechanic.
Uh-huh.
Now, as time went up, when I got stationed at Fort Riley, I got stationed with the 1st Squadron, 4th Cavalry.
Yeah.
And with the 1st Squadron, 4th Cavalry, of course, there's like about average size of a squadron is about 300 people. So you get multitask and do different types of jobs. So pretty much you do a lot of on-the-job training there without having to go to MOS school. My last year and a half there, I went to NBC school and became the squadron NBC NCO. And so that was a real joy, something different.
Now what's NBC?
Nuclear, biological, and chemical.
Okay. Very good.
And basically what we do is we set the alarms, know how to plot things if you get hit with chemical weapons or nuclear or biological warfare. So I also, in that time, I was the squadron drivers training NCO there at Fort Riley, and I really hadn't had a successful program before that, and I developed a program so well that the 1st Infantry Division indoctrinated it into their program. And then Desert Storm came, and I was going to be getting the doctrine to go national with the U.S. Army drivers training program. But I was getting towards the end of my duty. Actually, while I was at Fort Riley, and in
this was in '87.
This would have been in '90.
Okay.
In '90, let's see. So I went through in August. It was probably November. I was due to get out in December, and basically what they did is anybody that was going to get out got involuntary extended. So they took me out of my squadron and put me in a replacement company there on the main post at Fort Riley, and they said, "Okay, Sergeant Bruner, you're here. You've been involuntary extended, and so on and so forth." And I was like, "Hey, this sucks. I don't want to do this." I was a non-commissioned officer. I was trained to be with my soldiers and to get my soldiers ready to go to combat, and they say, "Well, we'll have to go through the channels on that." So for 2 days, I went out to the gymnasium and I handed out basketball to the MPs that were coming in to run Fort Riley, while the 1st Infantry Division deployed overseas. So and I was like, "No, I can't do this." I had connections with the Division Command Sergeant Major, being an NCO, and I went to the Division Command Sergeant Major. Said, "Sergeant Major, I've got a situation. I'm involuntary extended." And he goes, "Well, great. It means if I'm here, you're here." And I'm like, "Well, no, they got me handing out basketballs." And he goes, "What?" And I says, "I really would prefer not to. I'd really prefer to deploy with my soldiers." So he says, "Well, get your butt back down to the replacement company, and I'll have you some orders in the next probably 12 hours." And about 3 hours later, the company commander at the replacement, I can't remember her name, Captain Butler, I think was her name. She called me into her office and kind of chewed me out because I kind of jumped channels. I didn't go through the replacement sergeant major to get it done, and I said, "Sorry, ma'am," and says, "Well, you need to go back to your unit." So I went back to my unit, and from there I deployed. Let's see, we had to go through and we got what desert gear we did get. I think we each received 2 uniforms and a parka and some stuff like that, and a lot of getting stuff ready to ship. All of our vehicles we had to get painted from combat camouflage green, which was a woodland green camouflage, which was basically the Army's doctrinated color for Europe, because in the Cold War, which was what the majority of my service was in the Cold War, was always the risk of Russia provoking or so on and so forth. So all the Army doctrinated their vehicle camouflage woodland green to cover that part of the world. But all of a sudden, we had to get our vehicles painted camouflage, desert camo.
Mm-hmm.
So we did that like on a Saturday or something, and took us through. You remember the old paint shops, Earl Shives?
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of like that.
Mm-hmm.
You put grease and tape on the windows, or they painted it.
Uh-huh.
And we got back, put them on a railroad. They shipped down to Port Arthur, Texas, and shipped out through the ship channels down there, and they went overseas to Saudi Arabia. And during that time, we went through a lot of training.
Now, are you still in Fort Riley now?
Fort Riley, yeah.
Okay,
Still
you're
at Fort
still
Riley.
in Fort Riley.
Yeah, still at
And
Fort
when is this now?
This is all 90. This is right
This is
before.
still in 90.
Yeah, it's
okay.
still in 90.
Right, okay.
I mean, from 87 to, and I probably should have jumped that far ahead,
Uh-huh.
but from 87 to 90, I mean, there was really Cold War not going on. I deployed to Germany twice on Reforger 88,
Uh-huh.
which is where the forces go over, American forces go over to Germany and train with the German army. Just, in preparation, and it lets Russia know that, hey, the United States is still a major factor over here, and we're training. We're very serious about what we do. It's just a show of
But
force.
you did that a couple of times.
I did that
Training
twice.
with the German army.
Yeah, training with the German army, yes.
Really, that's interesting.
Yes.
Okay.
And then, of course, we did a lot of desert training at that time at Fort Irwin, California, which is called the National Training Center. I also did that 2 or 3 times. Really nasty place out there.
Uh-huh. Which is supposed to be, I guess. Right?
Yeah, it is.
It's not
actually,
supposed to be a country club.
no, not supposed to be a country club. And what was really nice about, actually, when we got to the big desert, we called it the Big Beach over in Saudi Arabia, we landed there, we're like, oh, NTC ain't got nothing on this place. At least there was the Well's Tail and a couple mountain ranges there in NTC, and if you look good enough, you can see Burger King sign for the field. But no, that was a shock. But anyhow, so in between that time, while I was there at Fort Riley, it was just basically training. It was a DNC military, we call it. We had a lot of drill and ceremonies. Everything was really snap to this, snap to that. Kind of what you see people go through basic training, and not to that extent on a permanent party, which is when you get your actual unit.
Mm-hmm.
But just the routine of Cold War really sucked. But when you train to do these things, you have things go on. Like when I was at Fort Riley in Grenada came up, there was a chance the 1st Infantry Division was going to get activated. Actually, we did get activation orders, but it was all taken care of very shortly down in Grenada, so we didn't have to worry about that.
Right.
So when Desert Storm come, and of course, I went back to my unit. People go, well, what are you doing back here? Why did you come back? And it's like, you just get that in your head that when you train your young soldiers, and Sergeant Bruner shows up, what have you been doing all day? Oh, handing out basketballs. You don't get to see him. I just really missed that. So I was thankful to the division sergeant major and the squadron sergeant major that they let me come back and go deploy with them.
Right. So you deployed in.
We deployed.
In the winter of '90.
Yeah, it was December 29th or December 30th. Really interesting. Our vehicles were gone. They gave us 1 week of leave, and
You have to go home for Christmas.
we got to go home for Christmas.
Yeah.
And
where's home?
home for me is in Missouri, Northwest Missouri.
Okay.
Yeah, it was real special. Of course, I had a baby and with my first wife at that time, and so it was just a very, very sentimental type Christmas. You just didn't know what to expect.
Sure.
As a soldier, you always hope for the best, but you prepare for the worst.
Right.
So and everybody at home, when you prepare for the worst, automatically assume the worst.
Yeah, sure.
But
So where'd you go?
oh, everywhere.
Yeah.
But anyway, we got stuck in this airfield down in Fort Riley,
Uh-huh.
and we were there overnight processing out. Red Cross was handing out boxes. Our families got to come with us because we actually got delayed for weather, so they let us stay overnight. They stayed overnight with us. We all kind of slept on the floor, and our baby slept in boxes on top of cartons to cushion things. And then the next morning we deployed out, we took a bus to Forbes Field in Topeka, Kansas, and it was a blizzard that morning. I remember because it was just real cold. So we had our winter gear on, and we flew from there to the Twin Cities, St. Paul and
Minneapolis,
St. Paul Airport. And then we flew from there to Brussels, Belgium.
Mm-hmm.
And we landed in Brussels, Belgium, and we landed at the airport. And of course, at that time, we'd gone through extensive training on Islam and on people, on identification, how to identify people and so on and so forth. And we had a kind of a scare there. We had a gentleman from that part of the world that was on the food service crew that got to go below the deck of the ship, and a lot of the NCOs, we got kind of skittish and talked to our squadron sergeant major and squadron commander and said, we're just not comfortable. This guy's been down there for a long time. And so they did a D-board. We had armed guards go around our plane at that time, and then we had I want to say it was probably an FBI crew. It was an American, some kind of crew came in and actually did the inspected any part of the plane he was, plus took him off and talked to him and questioned him and so on.
This was in Brussels?
This was in Brussels. Of course, in that mode, you're in combat mode, ready to go.
Sure,
so everything's pretty serious. Right now, I feel bad because I'm like, God knows what that poor guy went through.
Yeah.
Because of our skittish, But you think about things like, why is this guy going down below? We didn't know everything like that was going to happen. So we were there for about 8 hours while they searched the aircraft, and our armed guards switched off on the outside because at that time it became a police action. So we didn't have police there, so they issued us empty magazines. Says, okay, everybody go stand out in the snow. It was still pretty cold in Brussels. And after that 8-hour trip, we flew from Brussels to, we landed at King Fahd Field in Saudi Arabia. And we landed there December 1st. Matter of fact, flying over Ireland, we flew over Ireland as New Year's changed. It was 12:01, and the pilot says, "You're now flying over Ireland now. If you were anywhere in the world during New Year's, wouldn't you love to be there right now?" So we were all like in agreement to that. But, but we landed at King Fahd Field there in Saudi Arabia, and it was probably about noon. And those doors opened up, and here we are with long sleeve shirts. We had them rolled down and had our field jackets under arm, and boy, we walked out. It was hot. And it's like put us on the tarmac. We unveiled our colors, which is a ceremonial deal that units do today.
Right.
You roll your color. You have a ceremony to cover your colors, and then you have a program to uncover your colors when you hit ground. The chaplain gave his blessing over the whole squadron, and from there we hopped on buses and we went to a place called Cobar Towers, which was also called, we called it, when I was there, it was called the MGM Grand. Because basically this is an area that King Fahd made for the Bedouins, but the Bedouins didn't want it because they couldn't take their sheep and camels inside with them, and these were actual high-rise condominium type rooms and so on and so forth. Of course, there was no furniture, but we had sleeping bags. We loaded sleeping bags down. But we had a 2-day get ourselves caught up with the time and so on and so forth. That was the hardest part of jet lag I've ever had. And I've traveled probably all around the world, but that dealing with that was a really tough time change for us. And that we said, why do we need 2 days? Well, we figured out why, because that second day was rough. And it was about 3 days later, in those 3 days there before our vehicle showed up at the port, we just did nothing but we did NBC training, enemy aircraft and enemy vehicle identification training, and so on and so forth. So it was really, really interesting. We unloaded the vehicles. That was probably the last time I had hot chow for while we were there. They had mess facilities, and the Saudis helped feed us, and but it was probably the last time I had hot chow for quite a while. We got our vehicles, and there's a road there. It's called Tapline Road. And we knew it was going to be a long convoy, but it was a long convoy. We left at 5 o'clock in the morning, and we got there. It's probably 7 or 8 o'clock at night to our final area, and which was called TAA Roosevelt, Tactical Assembly Area Roosevelt. And we set up tents, and we knew we were going to be there for a little while. This is the first part of January. Of course, there were a lot of talks and stuff going on at that time, so we were probably about 100 and some miles south of the neutral zone, maybe a little bit further south of the neutral zone at that time. Saudi Arabia is a big country, and flat, and the sand there is kind of like Nestle Quick chocolate, So we experienced real quick in the field life that's when we started calling up saying we need pantyhose, baggies, baby wipes. You know, these are necessity items we got to have, because you could take a stocking and put it over your weapon to keep the sand from getting in it, and so on and so forth. And you could put that over any electronics you had, and that kind of kept the powder from getting into your stuff.
Yeah.
And the plastic bags, just to double check, and so on and so forth.
Right.
Really, really, really nasty stuff. We were there until, this is probably mid-January. By this time, towards the latter part of January, the original date, which I got in this box in place, but was in January when President Bush said that we were going to. They had a deadline for him to be out, but then we got there, and the Iraqi delegation said, "Hey, we want to talk to this." So they met in Switzerland, Geneva, and we had out of faith, we pulled everybody off the neutral zone. All units pulled back off the neutral zone. We had like a 3-day hiatus where I think they actually brought us up some hot chow, and then we played volleyball for a day, and of course physical training, and then more training just to prepare, because we was hoping that the Iraqi delegation was going to agree to the pulling out. But of course they didn't, and that's when James Baker received the letter saying they weren't going to abide by that. Right. And then February 14th, first part of February is when President Bush gave them the new, this is your deadline to get out. At that time, everybody moved north to the neutral zone. The neutral zone is the diamond on the map in between Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and Kuwait. That is nobody's country. And even though that Iraq had claimed that at that time, when they took over Kuwait, they claimed the whole neutral zone. The engineers, while all this was going on, built these big berms, and the Saudi engineers, American engineers, berms. There's a picture of me standing on top of one of these berms. Thing is, you don't get to see the berm. It's like 15, 16 foot high berm, and probably a good 10 or 15 feet deep. And so it was a pretty solid wall of dirt, sand, compacted there that separated the neutral zone. And we didn't realize at the time, but right across the other side of this berm there were Iraqi Republican Guard and foxholes down there. Wow. When we were up there getting our pictures taken, our sergeant major says, "Get your butts off the dumb berm," because there's an enemy right on the other side. I was like, okay. So we stayed there. We dealt with a lot of British soldiers, which was really interesting. We traded rations, and I should have kept mine. And we had a couple run-ins with some Syrian army. Yeah. And getting in too close, they'd fire their weapons in the air over our heads. Really weird is that was the biggest reason why Saddam wanted to go through and fire those Scud missiles, was to try to pull in the other Arab countries to get out of the coalition and come against us, because he was trying to get Israel to attack, and thank God there was good relations between Israel and the United States to withhold at that time, because Israel held back. If they would have, it would have been a really big mess, because we had a lot of Jordan and Syrian soldiers that were there, not even a quarter mile from us, that could have really caused a lot of problems for us and for the whole procedure if Israel would have attacked. And because if Israel would have attacked, the Arab nations would have come together, and that would have been the end of the coalition, right, with the Arab aspect help of it anyhow, except for maybe the Saudi Arabians. The night of of course, air war had been going on already, and right. I forgot to mention that, because that started in January. It's like a 2-week period there. Very quiet night. All of a sudden, we get calls to go to our fighting positions. So we go to our fighting positions. I've never seen jets fly so low. One of my soldiers had his Kevlar helmet on, and an F-16 flew so low it blew his helmet off his head. Wow. Just the vacuum and the suction. They were flying combat flight levels. B-52s flying over. You could hear them. And then that night, you could actually hear, there was so much bombing going on that night that you could feel the ground thump. And we're sitting there going, boy, them poor suckers, man. You had to feel for them. They were just getting pounded. I mean, the goal of the air war was to disrupt their supply lines and their communications. And later on, you'll find out that was a big, major factor for our being successful in that part of the war, because they had no communication, and their supply line was totally knocked out.
Right.
But for that week and a half or so, it was just, and if, the first couple nights you hear them, you didn't see them, and after the couple nights, so much of their air defense was destroyed. The B-52s are flying over with their bomb bay doors open. You can see the internal lights of the B-52s, and of course, you sit there and say, okay, give it about 30 minutes, and you'll start feeling the ground, boom, 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 and dropping in big 500-pound Volkswagens.
So that first night, the ones that we all remember, because I can remember staying up all night and watching the CNN and listening to the three reporters that were in the hotel and reporting from underneath the tables and the chairs.
Peter Arnett.
Yeah, and who was the black reporter that retired?
Shaw.
Yeah, Bernard Shaw.
Yeah.
And then there was one other. But anyway, that night when it all started, so how far away were you from Kuwait
we were up
City?
further. We were quite a ways from Kuwait City, actually.
Yeah.
But there was, those bombs they were dropping are 500 pounders. So,
yeah.
And of course they were bombing in between. None of this was going on in Kuwait City. There was no bombing going on in Kuwait City at this time. It was strictly Baghdad.
Right. That's
and
what I
any
meant.
of the surrounding airfields and surround. So what we were probably hearing wasn't probably Baghdad, because we were probably a good 500 miles from Baghdad still at that time. Maybe not quite that far.
Right.
But we were definitely hearing them hit the airfields and so on and so forth, and and anything that popped up hot radar-wise on the map.
Yeah.
The next, when the ground war started,
Right.
Which was the day we were all hoping it wouldn't happen, but we were ready for it, and we pulled up into by the berm. We were up at the berm. I knew something was going to happen that night.
What were you riding in? A transport?
I'd had a Humvee.
Okay, Humvee.
Drove a Humvee, you bet. I drove the squadron NBC and the squadron maintenance officer. I was their driver. And we were attached to the combat tram part of the 1st Squadron 4th Cavalry. But we knew, when we got to that night, the officers had a meeting at a big talk, which was the Tactical Operations Center. And I drove the captain and a lieutenant to this meeting, and the squadron commander had a meeting saying everybody's going to bed down tonight. So I knew right then and there, when everybody's going to bed down, we got MPs pulling perimeter patrol. I want fighting positions, foxholes dug. I want cots put in there. I want my boys to sleep good tonight. So we got back, and of course everybody had already started digging their foxholes, which was right next to their vehicles. This was probably about 6 o'clock. We had our MREs. We had a field artillery unit moving behind us. We started watching these big 105 howitzers come in, MLRS, multi-launch rocket systems. So we sit there. Well, the funny thing is nobody could sleep. We knew it was going to happen. At least the non-commissioned officers, we kind of all dug our holes together and just sit there and sit on our cots, in our foxholes, just kind of talking. And it was probably, I think, guys talking, laughing, kind of laugh yourself to sleep, talking, sleep, and all of a sudden, it was probably about a half hour later, the MLRS started going off behind us, and it was...
There's no sleeping at all then.
No, very loud. They really light up the sky. This was my first experience with it at all. I didn't know what to expect at all. All I know is I heard this... and there's 12 pods, 12 or 6 per pod, and there's 2 pods, and there's 12 of them going. And them things are shooting off, and once in a while you'd see one go. It's like, God, I hope they do that over here, And we'd watch these things that go atmospheric, those MLRS have two things. They have them where they go up and then come down an actual bomb. Most of the ones they were dealing with here had a system that went atmospheric, and as it come down in the atmosphere over their assigned grid coordinates, they would open up and they drop off what we call toe poppers. And actually what they do is they little round mines that had a tape on them, and as they fall, that tape engages that, and 2 things happen. It either attaches itself to metal and explodes, or if they hit the ground, they become mines. And I don't know, I guess there's hundreds of those things in each one of these little missiles. And we dealt with them. We called them toe poppers, what they called them, because there are actually some people that had step on them, and they'd probably go over your foot or your leg off, so it wasn't more than a toe popper, but that's what they were called. We had lot of experience with those things. Those things we saw a lot of. That was our biggest fear. We knew he was the biggest buyer of landmines. And I'll tell you right now, I saw all the landmines when I was there.
Mm-hmm.
One good thing about the sand is one day you'd see them, next day you wouldn't. You know, they'd blow the sand blow off of them, next day they'd be covered up.
Yeah.
But the engineers, that morning, as soon as that stuff started happening, them engineers, probably about a couple hours after them doing that, they engineers had these things called ACEs. There was like a big bulldozer they had made out of tanks and 113s and Bradleys, and they started punching holes into that big berm, and they started making little interstates all the way up and down the neutral zone. Mm-hmm. We were, all these units were there. I was in the 1st Infantry Division, 1st Squadron, 4th Cavalry. We were kind of the lead scouts for the division. Of course, we had 82nd Airborne, 101st, you know, all those guys were up north. They were dropped in on the northern part of Iraq, north of Baghdad, and worked their way south. Mm-hmm. Our mission was, at that time, was actually to go into Iraq and then to wait orders. You know, we were supposed to evaluate the situation, and then probably we thought we were going to go straight to Baghdad. Well, of course, that changed. We got into the day that they had the lanes opened up. It was the scariest part because all of our vehicles are, you know, really tight. And I mean, for miles, Tom, there's divisions worth of vehicles going through this big holes in the sand. And those guys worked their butts off, thank God. And there was some small arm fire from the guys that were doing that, for the guys that were on the other side of that berm. Some of the special forces and units and so on and so forth helped clear that area out, so we pretty much didn't have any activity after we crossed. So we got through that, and we went up this Wadi Al-Qafar, or whatever it is. I don't quite remember what that was. Basically, we had we were basically the forward part of the first ID, so we were going through scouting, reporting. We had M1 Abrams tanks, Bradleys. Of course, we had Air Cav too. We had Apaches and some, of course, Blackhawks and Kiowa Warriors, OH-59 Deltas, and the Cobras. And those guys really took care of us. And there was a lot of we just got probably about 25 miles into Iraq, and we took some artillery. And of course, the Apaches and the Cobras, they just take care of that. Because when you got this big gun in the middle of the desert and you take it off, it leaves a nice little smoke ring from the sky. Mm-hmm. So those guys are able to tack that all the way back to where they're at and go down and take care of the artillery. So we had probably a couple hours of artillery. Not much after that. The tanks and the Bradleys pretty much took care. We probably had, I'd say probably a couple small arm fire deals. The Iraqi army didn't really have a chance. I mean, they were a very trained army. We were really worried about them because they had fought this long war with the Iranians, the Iran-Iraq War, and a lot of the people that we dealt with personally and POWs and so on and so forth were actually from that war era, and they were just totally shocked. You know, they were so impressed with the organization of the United States military and the sudden reaction and just that massive force coming in. You know, here they got a couple T-72 tanks, which we were scared to death of, because for all that year in the Cold War, we studied Soviet equipment and weaponry and so on and so forth, but our M1 Abrams were just amazing pieces of equipment. And, you know, drive and fire at 55 mile an hour, it's just amazing. It's almost unheard of in any other kind of vehicle. A lot of those were bermed in areas, and the Apaches and all that took good care of that. We took a lot of POWs. At that time, we took some, you know, by force, some, and the more time went on, the more they were giving up. They were coming up with white flags and underwear or something white, because the psychological department of the military, the United States Psych Department, call them, they were dropping these leaflets. And Tom, I had some of those, but I can't find them. And they were just little leaflets that were in English and in Arabic language, and they dropped out of these canisters like the MLRS, and they dropped these things to all these villages over anything. I mean, you'd find them floating around. I mean, it was like biggest police detail we ever had was picking up those damn things in a compound. And they used those things as, just that flash of white that they were going to give up. Khafji, which was in Kuwait, the Marine Division, 1st Marine Division, had a hell of a time there. They were under fire a lot, got pinned down. They had POWs that were surrendering, and then they'd bring up a weapon and start firing, which is a big no-no.
Sure.
So we were really unsure how to take care of POWs. We did it with extreme professionalism. There was a major language barrier where a lot of these guys now have interpreters over there. And actually right now a lot of the Iraqi people understand more English than they did when we were there.
Right.
But they didn't understand. We knew how to say keef, which means halt, stop. And pretty much when you got a M50 or M60 or an M16 pointing at you, they kind of got the idea they need to drop their weapon.
Yeah.
But we were always worried about them having a claymore or some kind of grenade belt. They're big into explosives, so they like to have those belts and throw switches. So it was hands up. When we got there, we stopped. We had a lot of POWs. We had an engineering unit that had 2 big semi flatbeds with walls on it that came by and picked our POWs up and took them back to an MP unit. We were so far ahead of everybody. Our division commander was saying, "You guys need to slow down." We were at least almost 100 miles ahead of our next year's friendly unit. Now the Brits were not too far from us, but they went up into a little bit more in Iraq. We were told to halt. Then the 7th, I was part of the first ID was part of the 7th Corps, which was under General Franks, and they were all a lot further back. And they weren't even all the way through the system, through the berm yet. But General Rame, who was the commanding general of the 1st Infantry Division.
This was your commanding general?
This is commanding for the 1st ID.
Yeah.
He was on the radio with a squadron commander and saying, "Bob, damn it, you need to stop. I really appreciate what you guys are doing. You're all gung-ho. We're picking up crap all the way behind you. But, we can't keep up, So we kind of sit still for a while, and it just drove us nuts. And finally, the squadron commander says, "Sir, my boys are hungry, and we see a clear road." He said, "Well, operations changed. You guys are going to Kuwait." This is when the mass Air Force strike. The Kuwaiti Army had just started leaving Kuwait City. Too late. We done told them. This is like a day after the ground war started. We're moving in to Kuwait. We crossed Kuwait. It was really funny because we were sitting there hungry, tired of MREs. We hadn't had a bath, and I don't know how long. We didn't smell very well. I'm sitting there looking in the horizon, and I see these lights. And I'm like, "Oh my God, there's a truck stop here. Let's go get us a hamburger," And everybody was like for that. And of course, this was probably about 11 o'clock at night. We came across some small arm fire, and some the tanks and the Apaches and the Cobras were just really good. They took care. We had a really strong, close-knit unit, so they took care of all that stuff. And of course, there was explosions and tracer rounds going around. We had these MVGs, night vision goggles, that we had to wear. I wore a different type when I was in NTC. This was a newer part, and it was like. You didn't have much depth perception. You got used to it, and it was really nice when you're driving at night, but it was still took a while to get used to it. But the desert's so flat. That light, of course, ended up being oil well fires, and of course we came into a going straight through, no sleep, and couldn't sleep. And if you did, you couldn't. They'd say, "Okay, we're stopping here. Get a couple minutes, an hour shut eye or something," and then somebody else change. And I couldn't do it. Closer we got, we saw it was the oil fires, and that was just a sight to see. I've never seen. It was so bright, and of course the ground was shiny from around it, from all the oil that was blown off before the actual fire was started. And of course the Iraqis just pillaged everything in Kuwait City. Them guys were getting out of there in BMWs. They were getting out of there in Mercedes-Benzes. They had trucks full of electronics from electronic stores, jewelry, you name it, they had it. They actually cleaned out Kuwait City.
Wow.
And they were in vehicles. And, of course, we got told to hold back. And we saw the the F-16s and the F-15s and the Cobras and the Apaches and everybody going in on. It's called we call it Death Valley, and a lot of people saw the vehicles that are in between Kuwait City and the border of Iraq, where all the vehicles are lined up and disarrayed and blown up, and there was that was a very long night.
Yes. Wow.
We pulled a lot of POWs that night and pulled security perimeter. They didn't want us anywhere near there because they were just lighting that place up.
Mm-hmm.
And some people say, well, that was cruel. I'm like, no, that's war. And they were told a long time before to leave, and they were firing.
Mm-hmm.
We saw ground fire going after these guys before our guys even started shooting, or before they started laying bombs. Needless to say, it was probably about 5 o'clock that next morning. We drove into the Basra Kuwait City Highway, was what that's called, Basra, Iraq, and Kuwait City, and it was just I'd never seen anything like it. And we got there, and our squadron we had orders to capture any surviving Iraqi soldiers. We searched. There were a lot of bodies. Later on, we had body details where we picked up the bodies. The chaplains gave the we had to dig graves for them, and they were marked so the Iraqis could go back and claim the bodies, but we had to get the bodies off the battlefield. And of course, the chaplains gave him a service, the best he could, what he could. And we had a Protestant chaplain, but he had an Islamic on how to do that. It just so happens a lot of the POWs, a lot of mass injuries we dealt with. Our medics did a really good job of taking care of major shrapnel wounds, bullet wounds, burns, explosives, missing limbs. It's something I'll never forget.
Oh, man.
We searched vehicles. That's when we saw all this stuff. I'm like, what the hell are all these dresses doing here? I mean, these guys. And we actually had an MP unit come up, meet us there, and they said, there's nothing left in Kuwait City. There's not a store with anything left in it. Everything is in this highway right here. It's been destroyed. So we went through checking crates to see what was in crates. We found people in crates. We found this little Iraqi guy that hopped in a box no bigger than that chair, and he was in there all shriveled up, couldn't speak. He was shell shocked. At first we thought he was dead, and then I saw he was breathing. So we pulled him out, searched him, took him to the checkpoint, and come to find out he was an Iraqi chaplain. So he helped our chaplain do the burials later on. And of course, anytime we buried somebody from an opposing force, the grave was marked with grid coordinates so they can go back in and do what they had to do.
Mm-hmm.
But you just don't leave the dead there. We were there that whole afternoon, and it was probably a 25, 35 mile period of the road where there's vehicles just all over. That one area is probably about a 5 mile long, half-mile wide column of vehicles. That was the main column. And there were some other vehicles further up, tanks and so on and so forth, that were destroyed. You could hardly drive on the road, couldn't even recognize it being a highway. There were bodies all over. We got up there, all the bodies were cleaned up. That was our goal. I was in a unit with 300 and some people. We had over 6,000 POWs.
Mm.
So, it was 2 to 1 for each one of us there, or actually more than that.
Yeah, sure.
21 to 1.
Uh-huh.
We pulled in there. This was two days after the ground war had started, 3 days maybe. And that time everybody was exhausted. The old man, squadron commander, says, I want my people in Bradley's. We built a big Constantine wire camp for the POWs.
Mm-hmm.
We gave them our food, gave them our water, because it was going to take so long, and it was still unsecure battlefield behind us. It was going to take so long for them to get secure stuff up to us that we had to give them our supplies, which was always something you got to be very careful doing, or you might catch yourself running out of food and water.
Right.
And that came to be a pretty tough deal.
Yeah.
And so we did that. They dug latrines and so on and so forth. Of course, Iraqis didn't use toilet paper; they used water,
Uh-huh.
and water was very precious to us.
Yeah,
so,
sure.
So they did the details, digging the ditches and so on and so forth, and they were treated very, very nicely. But we had others we had to separate. You could tell the officers because they sit by themselves in a deal, and there's just a look that lower enlisted soldier gives to an officer when you're looking, and it just we could pinpoint those out. We had some guys that were college graduates from the United States, spoke perfect English, and they said, "We need your help. We need to know who's the bad guy here." You know, we know there's a few of them here because the way it's working, POWs. The thing we're supposed to do when we get POWs is separate and keep them quiet, no talking, because you don't want them to take a chance of talking to take over your compound. So we got those guys pulled completely out of the way, and they were put in a tent where they couldn't cause any more issues. And then the POWs started relaxing a lot more.
So you separated the bad guys from the good guys.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
You know, and of course, everybody's a good guy when you're a prisoner.
Right.
We love Bush. We love Bush.
Yeah.
I got a prisoner with me shaking a prisoner's hand, and the reason I did that is I got such a big kick out of these guys talking about George Bush. You know, old George. You know, and 41, and you know that's we love Bush. We love Bush. Yeah. You love Bush. You know. Now everybody loves Bush. You know. And so it was quite interesting. That wasn't the end of it. We got called again. The war's still going on. We've gotten the engineers came in finally behind us. They cleaned off the road where if other traffic could come through as it came along. Of course, we help with all the bodies. We didn't do it. The First Armored Division and Second Armored Division, they pulled in. We all flanked in about the same time, and we just took different parts of the highway. We got called in. It was later that evening, and division commander called the squadron commander, says there's a little town called airfield called Safwan Airfield, and it's on the very tip of Iraq, and we need this airfield. It's very crucial that we get this airfield. If we get this airfield, there's a good chance this war is going to end, and of course we're it. You know, so he says, 1st Squadron, 4th Cavalry, we're called the Quarter Horse Squadron. You all go in there and take this airfield.
How far away was it?
It was probably about 25 miles from where we were at, maybe 30 miles.
Okay, so not very far.
No, not very far.
Yeah.
Very heavily, had the 24th Republican Guard in there, which is one of the, they were one of the top-ranked Republican Guard divisions that the Iraqi Army had. Took a lot of sniper, a lot of small arm fire. More time goes on, we had more POWs. It was pitch black, had our NVGs on. We finally realized that, by God, guys, we're surrounded. We're on this little road, and there's 25 yards off both sides of the road. There's ditches, you know, causeways for the soldiers to drive. We keep on seeing these heads pop up and down. I'm like, hey guys, this ain't good, you know. Here we're stuck in the middle. We're in a good ambush situation. So we spread out, we outflanked them, and actually took those positions. And that night, the squadron commander was talking to the general that was at Safwan Airfield and told the general, if you're not out of there in half an hour, we're going to take your airfield from you, and we're not going to show any mercy. You can withdraw and leave, and nobody will mess with you. And first he said he wouldn't do it. And then, of course, the Apaches and the Cobras flew over. And then
That got his attention.
Oh, I thought, okay, sir, we need 45 minutes. He says, you got 30 minutes to be off my airfield, or there's no other communication. And the little skirmishes we had weren't too bad. And they actually pulled off the airfield, and that airfield was where the ceasefire was signed. When General Schwarzkopf met with the Iraqi delegation, my unit secured that airfield.
And security.
I was there when Schwarzkopf landed in his Black Hawk brigades and shoot our asses because, Jesus Christ, boys, I wanted some vehicles. We surrounded the vehicles with destroyed Iraqi vehicles. We wanted the Iraqis to know we were very serious. And General Norm was just a big bear, man. He's just a really fun guy. And he goes, Jesus Christ, boys, I wanted you guys to show these guys we're mean business, not embarrass them, because we had to pull all the vehicles back out and pulled security around. We had more news media than I've ever dealt with in my life, and of course we were told don't talk to anybody, guys. Things are going too good right now. We don't need people to mess things up. So Schwarzkopf flew in, then he flew out, came back in the next day. This big, there's 4 Black Hawks flying in, and these guys' things got missile launchers on the side. You don't see that on a regular Black Hawks. And he had Delta Force security guards with him. and they're heavily armed and so on and so forth. And so he landed. They had a tent they went into. There was like 2 big tents set up side by side, and of course all these Delta Force guys are around just coming in there. At that time, we started seeing they wanted to clear us off. We didn't want to intimidate the Iraqis at this time at all because it was just too close. So they pulled us back away from the tent areas a little bit. MPs actually came in and had their little fancy uniforms on. I was like, well, you guys ain't been here in the country very long, that's for sure. You guys smell good. But the Iraqi delegation was brought in. He was in a Iraqi regular, like a Land Rover, and the surrounded by Bradleys, and 2 Apaches flew above them. So you could see them coming in. As they come in, the Iraqi guys got out and went into the tent. All the tent things went down, and that's all she wrote. My squadron commander was in that meeting, and said it was very interesting, and that General Schwarzkopf was a very, very professional but very stern, and the Iraqis were definitely not speaking for themselves. You know, he made that very clear, and hence is why there weren't a lot of cameras on inside that tent, because they didn't want that guy would have said anything, Saddam would have killed him.
Right.
And there was already a lot of that going on. We had found out that a lot of people, back to where the communications thing I talked about, the reason the Iraqi army fell apart, which was probably the 4th strongest army in the world at that time, fell apart because of no communications, and their supply line went down.
Yeah.
And to be an army, you have to communicate. So a lot of the officers left.
Yeah.
They had very low-ranking individuals that were put in charge, and
Right.
a lot of those guys ended up getting killed, and so on and so forth
Sure.
after that happened.
Yeah.
So we're there. You know, General Schwarzkopf comes out, the Iraq guy comes out. General Schwarzkopf pulls the quarter cab guys aside and says, "We're really, really proud of you guys. You guys, my unit was the most decorated Army unit in history. And you guys, you know, I've added another ribbon to your flag and so on and so forth. And we're proud of you. And I'm sending up 3 reefer vans full of food for you guys to cook. So what do you want?" Somebody said steak, somebody said burgers, somebody hot dogs. And he says, "You get all 3, it'll be here tomorrow." That night, these 3 big old reefer vans, which looked very unusual, pulled in, and of course we didn't have any barbecues. We had all these destroyed civilian cars. We cut the hoods off and made grills out of them. So we barbecued all of our stuff on these grills. We made our own grills that he shut down. He says, "I'll even send you guys some beer," and we were real excited. Of course, Desert Storm was the first dry war, and which was probably a good thing. But the beer he sent up was Schlitz near beer, nastiest stuff I've ever had. So I was there. After that, we went to. We did a lot of checks, stop checks, and so on and so forth. We still dealt with a lot of POWs that were processed back. We went up past Basra, went up into Basra, which ended up being a very important city during this war.
Yeah.
Became a lot more aggressive. And then to a little town called Al Nazariya. I was about, the closest I got to Baghdad was about 50 miles. And our next orders, somebody showed me a copy of our next orders, our next frag orders, if the war wouldn't have stopped when it did, was the presidential palace in Baghdad.
I see.
And somebody says, "I'm going to put that in a frame." I said, "Well, I'd like to have a copy of that." I said, "That's the only one." So we were kind of glad it stopped when it did.
Yeah.
We basically, you know, President Bush caught a lot of stuff over that war, and he did exactly what he said he was going to do.
Right.
And we didn't argue with him one bit. You know, we were ready to come home.
Sure.
This time period now, I was there until about middle of May, or first part of May. Actually, the first part of May, and then they shipped us home. We did a lot of, like I said, stop point, checkpoints, and so on and so forth, and dealt with a lot of civilians, mothers with babies that weren't going to make it, and because Saddam completely took away all the medical surplus in the whole country and formulated them back into Baghdad and to his control.
Right.
So there was a lot of babies that didn't make it.
Yeah.
You know, the biggest thing we had over there that at that time that was useful was Gatorade, because they needed the sodium and the stuff that's in Gatorade. Our medics sit there and says, "I need your damn Gatorade." I said, "You want my Gatorade? I'm going to save this baby. Give me your Gatorade." So everybody brought up their powdered Gatorade because we had tons of water. And I never drank so much water in my life. That's probably why I don't drink enough of it today. But they would mix the water just to get those babies stuff to make, you know, the electrolytes and stuff, you know, and which was really good. So we were there for a couple months, month and a half doing that. Saw some very historical parts up there outside of Baghdad. I don't know if you, how a religious person you are, but there's a little town in the beginning of the book of Genesis called Ur. Well, I went to Ur, and it just so happens it's in Iraq. But very biblical areas there. I stood in Abraham's house, and or what's left of his house, what they think's his house. They think they found a diary that was, or a script that talked a lot about Israel. I mean Abraham and his wife and his mistress. So caretakers there showed us all around, and I've got a few pictures of that. After that, we went back to the northern part of Saudi Arabia, and we stayed in a place called KKMC, which was King Khalid Military City. Actually, we stayed outside of there. The big First Infantry Division made their own city. They shipped these big old air-conditioned aircraft hangars over there, and they brought in pizza and ice cream and pool tables, and had movies and all kinds of food, and it was just a downtime, which everybody needed. And it was just a really great time, and showers. The first shower I had, I don't know how long. We could actually wash our clothes. Not that made a difference, because you go two and a half months without washing your clothes, other than washing them in water that you had to wash yourself in first.
Right, sure.
It was pretty bad. And then we go through customs. Worst damn thing I ever. That's the worst customs check I ever went through. I says, why? Why are we having to do this? I mean, it was worse. I mean, I've been all over the world and been through customs, and this was nasty. And of course, they had people doing stupid things, you know, taking things that shouldn't have been taken. And we got back to KKMC. We had a briefing. We were going home. Greatest feeling in the world was when I got on that plane and it was wheels up, and we landed in Frankfurt, Rhein-Main Air Base.
Right.
We had about a 4-hour layover there. They took us off, took to the rec center. We got a car home, car families for free. Said, baby, I'll be home. And, you know, it was great feeling. Was we flew back into Minnesota. We had this reserve unit with us, and they had been there 3 weeks. And they had this big ceremony going on. And we're like, my God, you know, this is just awesome. You know, it was the greatest feeling in the world.
Yeah.
And of course, we were just 2.5-hour flight from home and just going nuts, you know. And it was just, it's like being a kid for Santa Claus again or something. And we took off and landed in Forbes Field. We had Interstate 70 between Topeka and Junction City and Fort Riley were just covered with people, news media, signs. It was the greatest feeling in the world.
Wow.
Came home, and then we get there and we says, okay, guys, we got to have a 2.5-hour debrief. Why didn't we do this on the plane in Minnesota? I could smell my wife's perfume 2 buildings over. And we had a 2-hour debriefing, which is very important, and just trying to get you ready for what's been happening here, and what, you know, if you notice any of this happening, you need to come talk to us. And we turned our weapons in, went back into the next big hangar. The band's playing, the wives were there. It's just, oh God, it was just, it was amazing. And got our bags loaded up. You know, went back home, ran through 3 stoplights, because over there, there's stop signs. You don't do stop signs. That's only a suggestion over there. I ran through 3 stoplights on the way home. My wife's like, you know, you've run through 3 stoplights? I says, I just got to remember where I'm at. So I got home, held my baby, and that was a good feeling.
That was in May?
That was in May. Yeah.
In May?
1st of May.
Yeah.
I got out the 15th of May. They come in and order saying, boom, you know, you were involuntary extended. Now the involuntary extensions are done. You start ETSing next week. Give me those papers. So I spent 9.5 years duty active, and I spent 4.5 years in the reserves.
I see.
So, and then that's about it.
How'd you get here? What brought you here?
Well, I was working with Save On Office Supplies in Manhattan, Manhattan, Kansas, and the opportunity to come to Texas came up. Hey, no state taxes in Texas. I was going to get a pay raise. Went from there down here, and I've loved it. You know, I've been here since 91, '98.
Right.
And so this is our 10th year. Was back in mine was September. My wife was October's, and we were called Texas home. So that's how I got here.
I see.
That's how
Wow, what a story! And so you were actually over there, what, 3.5 months?
Yeah,
About 3.5 months.
felt like 10 years, but
Yeah.
But yeah, we got there.
Yeah.
We landed there the 1st of
January.
January. You know, it may have been. I'm trying to think when I came back. It's in here.
To May, so it'd be almost 4 months.
Yeah, it was 4 months.
Yeah. From January 1st
I
to
think
about
my time out was June
May
4th. I think June 4th was my last day. That's what was my last day. I know I sat in my first sergeant's office and cried because
Yeah.
some people try to talk me into it. I just got back, and it just gets to a point in your life where you had enough.
Yeah.
You know, you want to do something different.
Sure.
You know, and I was so close.
Right.
Another 10 years would have been it. But now you kick. You know, my dad said, "Well, you'll kick yourself in the butt later on." And I did. So.
Yeah.
Uh,
Let me see what you got in the box.
Well, let's see here. I found and in the author's website. That's one he had right there. Same picture. It was just a crew picture. This was the crew right here, listing of all the crew and their families. Now he lived on the East Coast. As far as I know,
Plumback, is that how you pronounce it?
Plumback.
Plumback.
Yeah, as far as I know, he was the only one that was from Nebraska. I got Virginia, Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York, Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania. He was the only one from the middle of the United States, and I know that Watkins personally visited each family member that was on the East Coast.
Yeah.
He wrote the letter.
Where was he from in Nebraska? Where were they from?
Fremont, Nebraska.
Okay.
It's outside of Omaha.
Okay. Yeah.
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 And of course, this is just all stuff about pictures and so on and so forth. Now, my grandmother remarried to his best friend, and of course, he's grandpa to me. And Of course, he was a World War II vet that was in Europe.
Yeah.
And he got severely frostbitten during the Battle of the Bulge and got shipped back home. Which is probably a good thing because a lot of his people in his unit didn't make it.
Right.
But these are just different plaques and pictures of things. This is another letter from Edward Mitchell, who was the adjutant general that he personally signed. And of course, these are copies of those letters, but the original letters he actually signed.
Right.
He was the family's general because he did personally sign each one of his letters. He sent bad news on. So a lot of this stuff here. A lot of people didn't know about this.
Right.
My family didn't know about this until somebody found his name in a catalog. Somebody sent my grandmother a newspaper clipping that talked about vivisection in Japan, and it mentioned his name. The U.S. government didn't talk about this. A lot of these families to this day didn't know what happened to their family members.
Wow.
My mom has talked to another crew member's family, and they literally thought he died in a plane crash. And they found out that he was also died.
Is your mom still alive?
Yeah, my mom's still alive. Yeah, she's still alive. She's in Bennington, Nebraska.
I see.
There's a letter signed by Harry Truman.
But your grandmom's no longer
No,
alive.
my grandmother just passed away. She passed away in 2000.
I see.
Yeah, so.
And your grandfather's passed away too?
Yeah,
The one you call grandpa.
Yeah, he died. He died in 2000.
I see.
Now she died in 2005. He died in 2000.
I see.
Yeah. So this is at the Punch Bowl Memorial in Hawaii.
Yeah, I've been there.
His name is on the thing. When I found that out, I re-enlisted down there in front of the memorial.
Is that right?
That's me re-enlisted. My first time I re-enlisted when I was in the Army.
At the Punch Bowl.
At the Punch Bowl.
Yeah.
In front of his.
Wow. I've got that exact picture right there.
Yeah.
When we went to Hawaii, that was the first place we visited.
Yeah, it's a wonderful place.
Yeah.
My mom went through and applied for his POW medal, which she has.
Yeah.
And so on and so forth. Talks about the POW medal. This is the B-29 on tarmac in Guam. Really interesting story if you've never talked to anybody about these. Those B-29s were so heavy when they were loaded that the airfield sit on the edge of a cliff. And they had to take off. It would get off about 15 feet and then do a dive.
Yeah.
To build enough speed up to
Come
get it
back.
up. To
Yeah,
come back up.
I have heard something like that.
And
yeah.
some of those planes didn't come back up.
No.
But this was this is a map. I'm not sure where I got this. I think I got it online. There's another guy that does a lot of with Japanese POWs that we've since contacted. And this is a map of the flight that my grandfather was on. And this is over Kyushu, Japan. And I can't tell you, but one of these right here depicts my grandfather. And it tells, this is where, of course, there's the plane hit here someplace and the first person bailed out and so on and so forth. And the Japanese were very descriptive on things and on how things happen. I know that my grandfather, my biological, my grandfather said he was the feistiest son of a bitch you'll know. He spent just as much time in the brig as he did in a plane. Because when he was down here in Texas, he liked to drink a little bit. Of course, back then, I don't know too many of them didn't. Fell asleep on a bus, got woke up, knocked out at a major. It was an MP. And spent a few days in the brig. And I got to one way my grandmother got a saw at that time. This is the compound where the university's at, where they had the kept the prisoners at.
Yeah.
And of course, this is the B-29 crash site. Another picture of the university at that time. Of course, this is nothing but city now. None of the bodies were recovered because they cremated them.
Right.
And of course, the book will talk about that. These are some of the people that were at the university. This is from the author's website. One of the guys hung himself. We'll talk about that in the book. A lot of these guys went on trial, actually received the death penalty, but later they were let loose for exchange of information. That's really interesting. Of course, that was the room, examining room, crematorium. And of course, it's just amazing what you can find now. This is other atrocities that happened with the Japanese army in the Fukuoka area. And of course, dealing with the Kaishu was in here also. And of course, it tells you what part of the vivisections were the experimental dissection on the soldiers. There was a lot of atrocities. You know, of course, getting shot and death and worked to death. My brother did a paper on this. This is one of the web things that come out of the paper that didn't mention anything about it, but talked about the Japanese tests on allies described.
Yeah.
And then just stuff on his flying unit and B-29s. I was going to give this to my mom, but she said, oh, you did too much work, I'll keep it.
Wow.
Of course, that was his plane number and where it was made. It was made with Martin in Omaha, Nebraska.
Yeah. Wow, that's an amazing book. Then, so you got things in there with you about you got pictures of yourself in the box?
I got some pictures of in this box I do, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Some family pictures.
Yeah.
That I had put back. That was my grandmother, right there. These are emails that I received from. There was another best friend of his. My grandfather didn't like to talk about. Well, every time he would talk about my biological grandpa, he would cry. And 2 times I ever saw my grandpa cry, I was talking about my biological
because they were
grandpa.
best friends.
Yeah. He didn't buy anything with Japanese. And matter of fact, before he died, he was in a VA hospital, and he had a Japanese doctor, and it took him everything in the world for him to talk to that guy. But he did. You know, my mom says, "Dad, you got to forgive him." So that's my grandpa right there.
Your
Not my biological grandpa.
Okay.
This was my biological grandpa's best friend.
Right.
And this was in Germany, or
and that's him too.
This is him there too. Yeah, he was. He went over, and that's him.
That's
there.
him.
That's him and me.
I'll be darned.
Yeah, and let's see. It said it was the write-up on his paper when he was wounded in Germany. He'd been overseas since the first year and had entered the armed forces July 5th, 1943. He was with an division in the Army. He was the 28th Infantry, Bloody Buckets. And this is another letter. I'm not going to read this. I'm not sure who this was from.
So did.
That's my great grandpa.
Yeah.
Oh, I did have some of them other pictures now. I didn't realize I had those in here. Of course, that's me and my mom when I came back from basic for a Christmas exodus. This right here is me. I told you I was in Abraham's house. Well, that's Abraham's house.
I'll be darned.
And it's right next to Ur. And if you're a biblical man, you read about Genesis, Ur's you are. It's in the Bible. This is me on that berm.
Yeah.
This is toward the latter part. This is after the war was already ceasefire, and our chaplain wanted us to take us here, so we took trips up here. And of course, we still locked and loaded, had bayonets and gas mask and the weapons and full stuff at that time, so we were on the ready. So but I blew it up. Of course, that's the best I could get. These cameras caught a lot of hell over there, so you didn't get the best of photos. That was me at the George Bush Library,
Uh-huh.
and that's when looking back at the Gulf War, and it was 15 years later, I think. Of course, that's my dad's mom, and his dad was a veteran also.
Uh-huh.
My brothers. There's me on the only hilltop in Iraq. That was the highest point I saw in Iraq.
Uh-huh.
And as you can see, there's nothing. There's nothing. And it's like this. I mean, this is like popped out of nowhere. It's like, where the hell did that come from? It's like the Lord took a dump right there in the middle of it. You know?
That was your glam shot back there, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, that was
Yeah.
my high school.
Uh-huh.
My high school photo.
Yeah.
That was my grandma's best friend. She was like another grandma to me. That's when
Uh-huh.
I was stationed in Hawaii, and I was skinny and good looking. Let's see here. And of course, that paper's about him. I got
Yeah.
some other pictures I'll let you take from in here, though. I think they're some of the same.
Yeah,
I'll
I want to
those out for you.
scan them and
Whatever
yeah.
you want. Doesn't
Yeah.
matter to me.
yeah.
But my grandfather's got a hell of a story, I'll tell you. A lot of people don't know about it. And,
That's amazing.
well, it really blew people's minds. They had to do, when this guy wrote the book,
Uh-huh.
I know that him and this Japanese crew started doing this stuff about the same time because because when the Japanese crew went down there, they said, oh yeah, we know where that box is at. Somebody was just here looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
There's like 135 boxes dealing with the case of this.
Wow.
And that's just partial of them.
Goodness. Wow.
There's pictures. That's from veteran. That was from the very first Veterans Day parade we had here after many years.
I see.
And I'm right there. I was commander that year. That was me stationed in Hawaii, getting ready to go into Big Island.
I'm looking for. Have you got? Are there very many pictures taken in Saudi? I mean, in.
What I have in there, that's a Saudi pic there. Of course, that's me. It's, this room we're in is the MOC,
Uh-huh.
Military Order of the Cootie.
Right.
It's my commander's pic. That was in Saudi. Of course, it was just a desert shot. It's one of our Bradleys. That was some POWs. That was the first POWs at Desert Storm right there. The first. That's another picture of the POWs. That's an old Iraqi girl. One MREs. That's some of the POWs right there. See how they're holding the peace sign up? They're saying, "We love Bush."
Yeah, love Bush. Yeah.
Yeah, they weren't civilian clothes, but had military IDs. It's like, you guys look like discoers going to a country bar. That was me and a buddy of mine. That's our vehicle. That was in, that's a is it BMP or BRDM? Camels. That's an Iraqi aircraft. It's a MiG aircraft that was blown up from the sky. He tried to hide all of his aircraft. That's 50 miles from Baghdad. And that's the cockpit of one of those airplanes. Yeah, the desert. Or the POWs. That might be the same picture you have there.
Uh-huh.
That's at That's at one of the old king's graves. That's the Zergot of
Uh-huh.
There it is again.
Wow.
A lot of people think that may have been the Tower of Babel.
Really?
Yeah.
What a horrible place.
That hill I had my picture taken on, that's it.
Uh-huh.
It's
That's
like this pile right in the middle of the desert. That's the only one there was.
or how it got there.
I don't have a clue.
Yeah.
That's before we came home. It was 120 degrees in the shade. You watch the sweat come off and evaporate. My platoon sergeant. Again, it's a sign between Boswell and Kuwait City, or Baghdad. That's me there. That's
Right here?
That's my Hummer. Yeah, right there's me, my Hummer. A couple of the guys that rode with me. We had, like I said, just buried people. That's the back of that. What do we got there? That's artillery rolling in. That's a big 105s. That's me from AIT, and that's me when I was stationed in Hawaii. That's the day I got promoted to staff sergeant. That was in the reserves.
On the reserves? Okay.
A couple of my troops sleeping underneath the vehicle. That's customs. Customs day. Ooh. This is a group of guys. This is at That was my first sergeant and my company commander. These are people that were Iraqis that were lining the road wanting food. This was coming back into Saudi Arabia. I can't tell me what that says again.
Welcome back.
Welcome back, yeah.
More POWs.
Same shot of the POWs. POWs. My platoon sergeant again. I think there might be some doubles in there. That's an interesting picture. You don't have to take that, but original aqueducts from back in biblical days. These were wells.
Oh.
That's what those were.
What are you doing?
Customs Day. Kid with the MRE. Customs Day. Oh, jeez. That was our chaplain, and that's at the Temple of
Is this you?
No, that's not me. I think I'm the one taking the picture. So
Yeah.
the only time we really had time to take a lot of pictures is when we stopped.
Right, sure.
But we did have one guy that was assigned. I have 2 VHS tapes. That was an ammo catch that I found. It's one of my soldiers on top of that berm, and I think I'm coming up later on. POWs. They were getting. That's when our medics were looking at them. There I am on top of that berm. That's basic training. You had to go around. People wanted pictures. You weren't allowed to have any cameras.
Yeah.
You had to pay people $1 to take pictures. That's back in the early '80s. That's a flag and stuff my mom put up. My brother was in the reserves at the time. He got deployed to Germany.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your Desert Storm cards.
There's that picture of me.
That's it.
That's in Abraham's house.
Yeah.
That's me at the house. That's me with an RPG round. That was a Iraqi fighting position. That's me with that POW.
Oh, the one, yeah, with you shaking the hand.
Yeah. They were trying to have us be nice and cool them down. That might be me. Yeah, that's me there. That's at the Zerga to Hard to see. It's at the George Bush Museum. And then I was at the Veterans Parade. That's me, of course, John Velasquez. And then this is one of the reenactors that we got to march with us.
Oh, okay.
And that's me at the first 9/11 memorial we had here at the post. Aircraft recognition cards. Iraqi threat, air defense booklets,
Yeah.
Bibles I give each one of us. This is the what I kept in my pocket all the time. You hear about things with John McCain talking about the code of conduct. Actually, that was started years ago. This is actually the code of conduct and the TAP code.
Oh, really?
Yep. What do I have in here? I used to have. There's 2 things I couldn't find. I had a. may give it to my son, but I hope not. That is my Archon with Valor.
Mm-hmm.
These are bottle. I don't know why I kept these. These are bottled water labels that were on all the Iraqi bottled water we had. We actually had water from Iraq, and we were all kind of like, should we drink this? Or
Oh, that's a gorgeous medal there.
That was the. I've got 3 of those. 2 of them were given to me later on. I'm sorry. That was actually those are actual ribbons that were designed by King Fahd.
Really?
And King Fahd wanted. This is really weird, Tom. King Fahd wanted to pay every soldier that was over there.
Really?
And George Bush said, no, my soldiers are not, what's the word I'm looking for?
Not hired hands?
Not, well, yeah, not for sale, and they're, but instead he made each, the original ones, this is out of real gold. I don't know how much is there, but I don't have. This is a.
I'd like you to bring that with you.
Okay.
You can just show it on the camera.
Well, there's that one, and then there's the Southwest Asia Service Medal that the Army gave.
Yeah.
The only one I don't have is the Liberation. The ones the Kuwaitis did. I was out after they gave those. I mean, I'm still authorized to have it. I just never have written to get it.
Yeah.
This is a First Lieutenant Iraqi. And God, I wish I hadn't had it done. Be all upset with myself. I don't know what I did. I think I put it someplace.
With the what now?
Oh, I had a 20 dinaire.
Oh,
It's
really?
called Black Market. It was how Saddam paid his soldiers. I had his picture on it.
Oh, really?
It's worth money now.
A little something we got through customs.
No, we were allowed to have
It was
that.
okay?
I had a sniper rifle on an MP ticket.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Oh, this is. No, that's not it. That's a 1 dinaire. 1 dinaire, some Saudi and Iraqi money there. Stuff off my uniform. It's a captain insignia. My cross that I wore was there. This right here. I think there's just an Iraqi dog tag. They just engraved theirs. This was a Republican Guard lapel pin.
Huh.
Now, people say Republican Guard, emblem of Iraq, but it had a black shield. Black shield of Republican Guard. This is Iraqi money here. And these are 2 ball bearings off a T-72 tank turret.
Huh. Well, this is a great story. The problem always in doing this show is telling as much as we can in 30 minutes. And
Oh, that's fine.
and so when we do this show, we'll probably get we'll get you right to Iraq, because there's so much to tell about the berm, about the waiting, about the starting the ground war, about the horror that you saw and had to deal with. And then, of course, I think obviously the most fascinating story is the road to Safwan and what you witnessed there, and taking that air base so that the war could end there.
Yeah.
That's pretty fascinating stuff.
We thought, how can that base so far south?
Yeah.
Because it was right there on the border.
Right.
The big thing after that, after the air base, after that was we had all these refugees.
Right.
And I mean, I'm talking thousands of refugees.
Yeah.
And hungry.
Yeah.
That were, like I said, we were running out of food, and we had to have food and water shipped up, and of course after this was after the reefer vans and all the food, and these people just started showing up just everywhere.
Right.
We didn't know what to do.
Right.
We were trying to deal with combatants.
Right.
These people were coming up. Saddam just took every resource he had out of that part of Iraq and moved it north.
Right.
And a lot of people died.
Yeah.
The saddest thing I dealt with was of course I dealt with a lady with a dead baby.
Sure. Yeah.
Was his army of draftees There was a guy that was probably almost 80, 85 years old that they killed his daughter in front of him and threatened to kill his other daughter and his wife if he didn't join up. The man had shoes, dress shoes, no socks. He had blisters on his feet like I've never seen in my life. And I gave him my water at canteen, and I picked him up and I set him on the hood of my Hummer and gave him a ride to the POW check-in point because I didn't think he was going to make it. And I gave him the water, and he was so grateful. You know, I'm sitting there going, what kind of person would do this? You know, I'm not used to seeing this. You know, I'm from America. You know, things happen here too, but who's going to make? Everybody's like somebody taking my grandpa and killing me or somebody in his family to get him just to cooperate. So I mean, that was really interesting. So.
Yeah, for a kid from Missouri, that's
it's a
pretty eye-opening.
Yeah, pretty big deal.
Yeah.
This is the timeline of the first ID, and it talks about my unit down here. On February 27th, the 1st Squad of 4th U.S. Cavalry had seized the main highway, leaving north out of Kuwait, barring the Iraqis' escape. By the next morning, the division had taken up positions along the highway and fully secured it. Then it talks about the ceasefire and so on and so forth. So some of us cut off, I'm sorry. I didn't realize it was. Of course, these are papers when I got back, and these were things that kids mailed us. Scrapbook. Well, you know, I must have been after May 1st when I flew home, because this is the Stars and Stripes, and I got this in Germany.
Wow. Get that. Well, we'll do this tomorrow.
What time tomorrow?
2:30 is when we start taping, so if you can be there around 2:15.
That'd be great.
And when you go into, you know where it is now, right? The KMU is just right, the building to the left there. When you when you go into the parking lot, which is just right beyond the building, the KMU building, right immediately beyond it, you'll turn left into the parking lot. Where you can park and not have any problem is immediately to your right. When you turn off the street into the parking lot, immediately to your right, there's about 5 parking places that face the street again.
Okay.
And there's about 5 of them that say authorized vehicle only. Well, you can park in one of those. Okay. That's for guests of KAMU.
Okay.
So then we'll just come right in the parking lot, do a U-turn around to your right, and park right into one of those parking spots that are facing the street. And then you can just walk down the sidewalk and come right in the front door. I'll be there around 2:15 tomorrow.
Okay.
And we'll start taping around 2:30.
Sounds good.
And I'll use probably most of these pictures, and I'll scan them, and I'll return the pictures to you tomorrow. And if I can keep the book to read. Well, let me look at the back there of the. I'm gonna use a picture out of the book of your granddad. Of course, we can't talk a lot about that because we're going to be talking about you, but just towards the.
You want that picture? I don't know if that was in there or not.
Well, I'll tell you what. I've got enough of you that aren't really. Okay. That one's kind of dark, and I don't know how it'll show up. I was.
Those you already have.
Yeah, I was looking for the.
That one.
Was that one in there?
Yeah, I think that one's
that one was in there. And that one, there was a better picture. Okay, so no, I don't need anything from there because I've got everything back here. And I'll take a picture out of the book of, because there was another, I can use that, or there was another picture in here.
Sure.
Of that, which I can take. Yeah.
Yep. One thing else I did when I was in the military is not only I did, but exciting was I was involved. I got to go to the Philippines when Ferdinand Marcos got ousted.
Oh, really?
And I was on the guard detail plane. Flew back after his, and I helped pull guard at his residence when he was at Hickam Air Force Base for a week.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, him and his wife.
Wow.
Without the shoes.